Welcome to the Hip Hop Hustle podcast. We are back. I'm extremely excited about my next guest, my current guest. Enik is here. He's an artist, a songwriter, a mix engineer. You've worked with some amazing K-pop people, J-pop people. You've got your own band as well. Man, you seem to do it all. It's kind of hard to be able to do all these things really well, let alone one of these things really well. So it's always an amazing thing to be able to say that you do lots of components. You're also a solo artist. You're in a band. You like, I don't know. It's weird when I talk to people who are multi-skilled and have multiple facets to their music. They're like, yeah, they play it off so casual, and I feel like you're about to do the same. But as I said,
No, not at all. Not at all. Like I learned everything out of necessity. It wasn't like I wanted to become a producer or a mix engineer, mastering engineer. Like those things I had to learn because I couldn't afford to pay anybody else, I think that's a key element that I think kind of messes up a lot of independent artists when they have to rely on too many people. And I don't think they realize that until they get like later in the game when they realize like every little, asset of their career is dependent on somebody else. Like whether they're like waiting on something from a video editor to the okay from a record label, to like the first, mixes from a mix engineer, a master, like it's like, but yes, so many people you're waiting on, like your career is just dependent on so many other variables besides what you're doing. And I think that slows down an independent artist dramatically. So the only way I see around that is either one, you have the money to pay the people to get what you need really fast, or you just learn the skill. And I didn't have the money, so I learned the skill.
How long did it take you to realize that's what you needed to do?
uh, that was pretty fast, I think. It's like you try to succeed as an artist for like so many years and you just realize that crap, like this producer won't, they won't reply to my emails, it could be a million things, but I just realized that it would be faster for me to learn how to do it myself rather than to keep on like depending on people. And I remember I had signed this record deal in Taiwan to be a solo artist over there. And nothing was happening for me over there. I didn't really know what I was doing. And I knew a really big K-pop producer in Korea, and he's one of my biggest mentors, Jae Chong. And I remember I had like $400 in my bank account. I was like, man, and I gave him a call and said, if I fly over there, will you teach me everything you know about mixing and stuff like that? And he was just like, what? He's like, all right. And it was the last $400 in my bank account, and I just bought a ticket and I flew over there. and I just kind of learned as much as I could from him in a few days. And then, here we are.
That's pretty amazing that you are able to do something like that. Like, I think it takes a special type of person to look at their bank account and be like, this is my last money. And instead of doing a myriad of other things, you put it all on the table and you give someone an offer, not for anything other than to learn some skills, which is what I find impressive about that. Is like, you're not guaranteeing money in return. You're not guaranteeing a career in return. You're simply asking for someone to teach you and then relying on your own ability after that. But do you remember the mindset you were in when you were like, okay, this is something I'm going to do? Like, it's one thing to think about it, it's another thing to offer it, and then another thing for it to be accepted, and then for you to actually go and do it. Like, do you remember the mind state that you were in when you were going through that?
Yeah. I mean, I was already, to be honest with you, I feel like, all right, this is kind of like a side note, but I think most people that choose to, pursue a career in music, they probably struggle with some type of mental illness. um, I say that like, I don't mean to come off in the wrong way, but what I mean is like, musicians, like, we don't really know 100% how to express ourselves, like, and that's why we choose to express ourselves through creative means, right? And that's not just musicians, that's artists in general. I think that's our way with connecting with people. And so during that time, I remember I was just super depressed, and I felt like, man, there has to be a way to do this. And I think also, if you're like, with all your being that your path is to become a musician, there's really there's no way out. Like, what else are you going to do? Like, you can go and take that 9 to 5 job, but you'll be miserable, right? Or you can just pursue it to the end. And I think my mindset has always been, I'm going to do this or I'm going to die trying. And I made a ton of like horrible decisions based off of that. Right? So I'm not telling somebody to think like that at all. But my mindset at the time was, I'm all in. And I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't have like a backup plan. Like, I didn't think about, okay, how the hell am I going to eat when I get over there? I didn't think about how am I going to pay my bills when I get back. Fortunately, at that time, the record label I was signed to was paying my rent, and I think that's something that is not common anymore. But there was, all I had to think about is, okay, how am I gonna eat, right, when I get back? But I feel like I was just thinking, okay, I'll figure that when I get back. I would not make a decision like that today. Today it's like something different, right? Today I have way too much anxiety to do something like that. But during that time, I was able just to do it. Yeah, man. But that one decision, I think it changed my entire life, my life track. So I think every artist eventually steps into that moment. It might not be that drastic, but we all have that kind of moment.
I find it so fascinating that you were like, I'm willing to give it all in. Like, it's weird because as you reflect behind, I can see it. You're like, I didn't think about that, and I didn't think about this. I didn't really I just knew that I was going all in, that I was willing to risk it all. And then, as you said, you wouldn't be where you are if you didn't risk it all. So it's kind of like, you don't know until you go for it, in a way. And I think that's the scary part about this industry that everyone is in, is, as you said, most people will come to that point where you're either all in or you're all out. And if you choose not to be all in, you are likely to potentially rue the mistake that you made of not going for it, of not backing yourself, of not giving yourself the opportunity that you had. It's just that hard leap of faith that you have to make at some point where you're like, I don't really know what will come of this, but it feels like it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's kind of like this. I feel like, to be honest with you, I think the path to being an artist is probably not for most people. I think a lot of artists drop off like flies, like, as they go down that journey. But knowing that, I think one of the biggest fears I always had was, waking up one day, you're 60 years old, and you wake up, you're like, damn it, I should have just did it. What would have happened if I talked to that girl, or I did this, or I did that? I don't want that. I don't want that type of regret. I'm sure we're all going to have plenty of regrets later on, but this isn't the type of regret that I want to have. What if I just did it? And so, yeah, it's a gamble. And again, I'm not telling, if you're an aspiring artist, I'm not telling you, hey, throw it all in. It's not that simple. You have to, I feel like, as an artist, if you don't believe in yourself, why should anybody else believe in you? So you have to really believe that this is the path that was meant for you. And I really believe that, down to my bones. I believe that that I was supposed to be an artist. I was supposed to be a musician, and those all played into my final decision making. But, you know, I guess it also matters like if you can handle it, right? Like at that point in my life, I was already in a foreign place that I wasn't used to. I was just like, what else could go wrong? I mean, I was being stupid. Like a lot could go wrong, but you know, you're not really thinking about it. So I guess it's where your mindset is at too. Like, can you mentally handle it?
Well, I agree with you. The fear of regret is something that I have as well. It's like you said, you just don't want to be sitting on a porch when you're older, being like, I could have. That you don't
Right.
want that to be the sentence that comes out of your mouth of like, I could have, or I grew up with this person who then ended up doing the very dream that you had and you never pursued it for whatever reason. Your insecurities got in the way. You didn't believe in yourself enough. You took, quote, the responsible route, which again is all okay, but you just don't want to be filled with regret. Either way, it doesn't matter. You just want to be accepting of your choices, of like, I will make this choice and I'll be okay with it not working out the way I wanted it to. And I'll be okay, especially if it works out well. I think that's the hard part. You almost can't be drawn to the outcome. You have to be okay with the unknown and just being in the ring and believing that over time that you'll be okay and it will sort itself out. That's what I find the most difficult part. I think we're biased towards positive outcomes as opposed to better decision making over the long term.
Yeah, and you know, being an artist is just like honestly, it's just like being having your own business. It doesn't. There's really no difference in the aspect that you're taking a risk on yourself. You're probably going to invest a ton of money that you're going to lose in the beginning, right? You're not going to make any of that profit back for a while. It's all a gamble. It's a risk, but I think people have a hard time like associating it with like a normal business because they're not thinking like it's a business, and it's hard. It's a little bit like getting in the business mindset of being an artist. That's a definite like mind change where you have to shift it. And that's where, I respect career artists a lot, like to make a business out of it's you have to have it's like a balance of having like, okay, I have to be this creative, but yet my creativity has to, have that audience. So like you're just juggling a ton of things and you have to sacrifice certain things. And certain artists are like, those purists, like they're just like, well, no, I'm not going to sell out. I'm going to do this, do that. It's just like, okay, that's cool. I get that. Right. Nobody's telling you to sell out, but ultimately you're going to have to decide, do I want to be a career musician or do I just want to be a musician? Because being a musician, you could be on the street, just gigging it. Right. And if that makes you happy, then more power to you. But I wanted to be a career musician. I wanted to be able to sell out to thousands in a crowd. I wanted to be able to pay my rent with the money that I make from music. And so that was always my mindset. And so I think it's a different type of strategy when you think of it that way.
Well, it's funny because, as you said at the beginning, most artists become artists to express themselves.
Right.
So that's how you begin, as a form of expression, as a form of outlet. You don't, most artists don't think of it as a business until they realize that the only way to actually be successful as an artist is if I take this seriously and treat it like a business. Like it's almost the magic disappears. And it's like, oh no, I have to take this seriously. And at the end of the day, if I don't, then as you said, it's fine, but I just will have to have another job or I will have to
Exactly.
support myself another way. And if you want to do that, like you said, you can. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, if you're a career artist or if you're an artist for a long time, there is always a point where you're like, I wonder if I could do this full time. That's what I
Yeah.
genuinely believe. I wonder if I could do the thing that makes me happy and gives me joy all the time and that be my career as opposed to this other thing that is fine, but it only supports the thing I actually want to be doing, which is making music. So why not make money while making music? And it's best of both worlds.
Yeah, basically, that's how you sum it up.
Can I ask you about the self-belief? Because I find this important and fascinating of like how you knew inherently that, or how you felt inherently that this was something you were supposed to do.
All right, I'm not going to get too religious in this podcast.
You can if you want, honestly. You can if you want. I don't mind.
I won't, for the sake of people that are going to be listening to this. That's a whole other conversation. But I believe personally that, like, you know, every person is born with a set of skills, talents, you know, and some people spend more time than others figuring out what those talents are. So I believe that God gave me a specific skill set, and that was music. That was creating music. That was performing music. And, you know, there are things that he blessed me with, and there's a ton of things that he didn't bless me with, right? I don't have, you know, as much as I've been able to turn music into a business, I would say I'm a horrible, like, business person, per se. Like, you know, I don't have, like, the skill sets that, for instance, people have with, like, networking, even though networking is, like, a huge part of being a successful artist. There's just a ton of things. And so I feel like if you know, like, what your skill set is, it's like, you know, like when you're a kid and you're just really good at drawing, like, it's like, and it brings you joy, right? So when I was growing up, I would see these kids, they'd just be ripping it on like drawing comics and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, you know, you definitely have a skill that sets you apart from other people. So it's like, where do you go with that? Do you have a passion to make that into something like a career? Like, so from a really young age, I grew up in a pretty musical family. My mom was a piano and vocal teacher. My dad sang opera all through college. And so I knew that I wanted to do music from a really young age. I remember at show and tell, I was like first grade. I brought a keyboard home. Still not home. I brought it to class for show and tell, and I tried to play Sweet Child of Mine on my keyboard. Like, and it was horrible, but I like that was my show and tell. Like, they're like, what do you want to be? And I'm this like little Asian kid, and they're like, I want to be a rock star, right? And they're just like laughing and stuff like that. But I knew what I wanted to be. And so that might not turn out to be like what you picture it to be. Like, you know, like, just because you have the skill set doesn't mean you're going to be a rock star or this or that. But I guess you got to decide, like, you know, what makes you happy with using your skill set throughout life. And so I don't think that was ever a question for me, of like what I was meant to do. It's more of, how the hell do I get there? Like, I always knew I wanted to do it. And I think a lot of people, there are plenty of people that don't know what they want to do in life. There's plenty of people that do know what they want to do. And I think there's a handful of people that know what they want to do, but they're too scared to do it. And so, I think the only difference with me between those people is I was never afraid to kind of try those things. I was never afraid of failure, and not in that sense.
I don't think there's a handful. I think there's a lot of people who know what they want. I think handful, I think if you asked people, they would know exactly what they want to do or what they want to try. They don't know if it'll be the thing for them, but they know that that's what they want to try, but they're holding themselves back.
And it sucks because, you know, they get to that age where they're on that porch and they're like, damn it, I should have tried. And so, I don't know. I guess whatever drives you.
Well, I think hearing people like you talk about it helps. Like, I think the more that they hear that despite the doubt or despite the doubters or despite all the reasons not to do it that stood in front of you, you still went for it and that it was okay. And I think that's the important thing is like, it's fine. It's probably not going to be the end of the world you trying to pursue your dream. If anything, you're probably going to learn something about yourself extremely valuable. And I think that's almost scary in itself, of just what will I learn about myself in the process? It's easier for me to keep it as a dream than to have it manifest as a reality and have to come to grips with, maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was. Maybe it's not something I genuinely like, or maybe I genuinely do love it and now I can't go back and I have to keep going forward into this world. And I think it's a combination of it all that can hold people back.
Yeah, but I think on top of that, you just got to be willing to accept that failure is okay. It's okay to fail. Like, who cares if you fail? People fail all the time, but failure doesn't have to it doesn't have to dictate who you are. It can just be a stepping stone onto that next phase of your life. Like, whether, you learn from it and then you fix it and keep on trying to chase after what you're trying to chase, or you fail at something good. Now go another direction. Like, who knows? But like, you just don't know. And I think people are just too scared. Like, what's the worst that could happen if you fail? Like, you think your family's going to disown you? Well, news, like, people change all the time. Like, even your family disowns you, chances are you can go back later on and make amends, right? Like, whatever job that you think as a backup plan, you could probably get it later. If it was meant for you, you can get it later. I just think that, like, life is a really it's pretty short when you think about it. You only have this much time on Earth, and I just don't think we were meant to do the things that we weren't made to do. I know that sounds kind of ambiguous, but I think that, again, I think we were all, like, kind of given, like, our uniqueness, like our special gifts, our special talents. And if you know what yours is, you're already so much further ahead of all the people that don't know what theirs is. Try it out. Like, and if anything, I think it might knock you onto the path you're supposed to be on.
Yeah. I think it's the fear of the bumps in the road. But it's weird because you drive a car anywhere and there are lots of bumps on that road. But
Right.
over the journey, you don't notice any of them because, okay, yeah, there's a pothole. Yeah, there's a bump here. Yeah, it wasn't smooth here. But you got to the journey and to the place you wanted to get. And I think that's the metaphor for life, is you're going to get to where you need to get to, but the bumps in the road are part of it. Like, the divots are part of it. But if you focus too much on that, you will never make it to the end. Like, you will stop and you'll be like, well, there's a pothole on that road, so I won't even travel that road. I'll just stay at home all day. And
absolutely.
That's it. Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
And on top of that, I think people have they overestimate the security that they think they actually have. Like, what? So you have a nice cushy job, right? That's stopping you from chasing after whatever you got. Like, and they might be like, oh, but rent and all that stuff. What makes you think that you're so safe at your job? Like, that job could lose funding, or like they could do their job wrong, right? Their business structure wrong, and end up having to lay you off a year later. Like, it's not any more secure working for somebody else than it is, trying to work for yourself. I think, especially in today's economy, things are dropping left and right. It doesn't matter if you're working for Disney or like these mega companies, like, they're laying off people by the hundreds, by thousands, right? And I think there's another thing. I feel like it's either there's like these two paths in life. It's either you're making somebody else's dream come true, or you're making your own dream come true. Like, which which one are you going to be okay with? Like, if I work for somebody else, right? Like, it's not technically my passion. I'm just, I'm making that girl's dream come true. If I'm doing it for myself, then I'm my own boss. Like, what are you okay with in life?
And let's be honest, in corporate, it's no one's dream. Because at that point, when you have stockholders and you have boards, everyone kind of cares, but no one woke up as a kid and said, I want to be a CEO of a massive conglomerate that I didn't create the vision for. I just stepped into as the CEO because it was the right time. That's like, that no one wanted to do that. And I've worked corporate for a long period of time. No one knows what the fuck they're doing. Everyone is figuring it out because everything is new every day. Like, because the world is changing and it's changing so rapidly, the experience that you had 5 years ago, it helps you learn and develop, but it's not the same as it was 5 years ago. So you have to figure it out. You have to make choices. You have to make guesses. And you're 100% right. I mean, COVID happened. How many layoffs happened in big companies? They were all laying people off because they couldn't sustain it. That's out of their control even. Then, something happens with the board, something happens with stock price. Next thing you know, they need to make profits. They make layoffs. That's kind of the risk if you work for a self-employed person who has a small business. It's risk. It's all risk. It just depends on what risk you're willing to take. And I think it's easier to handball the responsibility.
It's a mind thing. Is this, it's like a false sense of security in my view. Like, it's like, oh, you're just putting that responsibility onto like a corporate figure that everything's going to be okay, that you're still going to have that cushy job later on. So I'd rather be in control of my own destiny than, worrying about if this company is going to fall apart tomorrow. Because just like you were saying, like, yeah, I've worked before I decided to go full-time music, I was working for, that corporate job, and they didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah. They literally never know. Can I ask you, your parents being musically backgrounded, what do you think that did to you in terms of growing up? Do you feel like their influence had profound influence on you, or did you always have a sense of your own musical talents before that?
So my parents started training me and my sister in like music theory at a really young age, and it wasn't like the nice type of training, like, we get smacked on the hands if like we were playing.
Yeah, you had
wrong.
foreigner training. Yeah,
exactly. We got beaten to submission to learn how to play our stuff. So at a really early age, obviously I hated like the traditional sense of it. So I remember at like, gosh, I was like 6 or 5 or 6 that I wrote my first like song, like,
wow.
And because I hated playing what my mom was telling me to play, so I just started making my own stuff up. And so I think because of the way that they were training me, like, it made me kind of go against like what they're telling me to do. So from that point on, I think eventually they realized, they're like, oh man, this kid, he's just going to do whatever the hell he wants, right? So they eventually they let me do what I wanted to do because they realized they couldn't hold me down, right? My mom, on the other hand, so she worked for Yamaha Music School for like the longest time. But the first moment that she had to quit working for that company and go independent and start teaching piano and vocals on her own, she took that. And then she actually succeeded on that really well. She just retired. And, for, years, she just, taught other students. And I think that was also my independent mindset. Like, hey, my mom did it. She went independent. Like, I can do it too. I think it's different. I am fortunate that I had a parent figure that went the independent route, and figured it out. So my dad, on the other hand, super analytical guy. He was like, don't do it. Always yelling at me, like, go to school, become a doctor, like whatever. Right. And so he didn't kind of vibe with it the same way. But yeah, I'm more like my mom. So in that sense, that's how it shaped me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the stereotypical pathway. I mean, for me, it was like lawyer, doctor, same. That's like my parents are from overseas and my heritage is not Australian. So it's the same thing. It's like, go to school, study, get an education, get a secure, high paying job.
Yeah.
Have a family.
Which I would tell my kids too if I have kids, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't go down this path. Like, but it's just love. They say it out of love, but you definitely, like, my mom being the way she is, like, it just it really inspired me to kind of do my own thing.
Can I ask you, you mentioned like kind of offhand when you were at school, you had show and tell, you brought the keyboard, and you were telling people your dream, and they were kind of laughing. How have you felt being Asian in the music industry? Like, I think that's something that I think you slightly touched on, and us being from different backgrounds, I always find it interesting to understand the composition of what it was like growing up, of like what it was like, especially in the US, and whether there were challenges that you faced.
All right. So being an Asian artist, an American Asian artist, is definitely, I think, it's different than being any other type of artist, and I'll tell you why. It's like you have the pushback from everyone that's not Asian, like in the industry. It is what it is, right? So if you're like, for me, like I was always doing like rock in the very beginning, or pop rock, and then so like that's a predominantly white, genre, right? So you're going to have to prove yourself way more than you need to prove yourself to them. And then, believe it or not, no matter how much you see like all those Asians supporting Asians, I feel like Asians are the most toxic towards their own. And it has to do with the way that we're raised culturally. We're raised by parents that are always like comparing us to other Asian kids. They're saying, you got to be better than this kid, this parent, like that's ingrained into our culture. So no matter like, what generation you are, like, I feel like there are generations that are starting to break that, but you're dealing with people in the industry that kind of were culturally raised like that, if they're Asian in the industry. And so there's a lot of gatekeeping that happens. If like an Asian does make it into the scene, like they're like, chances of them letting you through are worse than you going to somebody else. So I've had to deal with a lot of that. It's like one of those, it's just a thing that it just kind of, you have to watch it evolve. It takes small steps to open up the pathway, I think. But they're like stepping stones, it slowly opens up. I think it's probably one of the most difficult things to succeed as an Asian American trying to be an artist, because automatically off the bat, like you come into the scene, they're gonna be like, "Oh, what are you, K-pop artist?" Like, it's just like that's the only thing that I feel like the majority understands in the industry. I'm not talking about like the audience. Audience wise, there's plenty for everybody. There's in K-pop, I feel like it proved that. Like no major label wanted to mess with K-pop. I remember, my buddy Jay, like he is huge, like producer. Again, I was talking about him earlier, one of my biggest mentors. He is responsible for bringing one of the first Asian acts over to America. They signed a deal with Cash Money back in like 2000, I think, was it 12? It's like a $13.1 million deal. This was before BTS, before but even though if a lot of people will never know who Aziatix is, which was that group, they set the pathway for BTS to come over. Like, it was all these like moves, and that wasn't a small move by any means, but like it takes a bunch of these to finally open up the doors to accept other people. So, but before BTS even, came over here and proved that they had a huge audience in the States, or actually worldwide, no major label here wanted to mess with them. They were just like, there's no market for that. Oh, we don't want to mess with that, right? But they, I think artists like BTS, they proved so much that there was an audience for them that all the major labels had to jump on board. If they didn't, they'd be losing money. And so whether or not they really believed in the product is a whole different story, but they knew like they can read dollar signs, right? And they knew like, crap, dude, if we don't jump on this, we're going to lose potentially millions and millions of dollars. And so that's created the gateway. And so now you have K-pop in America and the rest of the world. I think everything else is still kind of there. It's starting to kind of come around, but it's still, there's a lot of push, definitely a lot of push. So it's difficult, but you just got to push at it.
It just shows the power of the fans though.
Yeah. And I think that, this is probably a different discussion, but you know, the whole direct to consumer model that has been going on in streaming, you know, you see Kanye talking about it, and all these people like pulling their music off of like DistroKid and going straight to consumer. I think that is eventually going to be something that more artists are doing to bypass the whole like the gatekeeping and all that stuff of like Spotify or all these other type of platforms that like mess you up with algorithms. Like, you know, times
Yeah.
are changing.
I think it is the right time to start doing it. I mean, I don't know. I think you will get better artists and better quality of artists when they genuinely feel that you can make music and make money from music, as opposed to I make music to then plug a product line that I have that is the only way I can generate income outside of shows. Like, I think that is a bad thing for the industry, that
Yeah.
music becomes a commodity to then sell other products. That is
Yeah.
not good. That's not what you become an artist for, and you change the meaning of what music is. And it doesn't become something that is entertainment in its essence. It just becomes an ad. And then once it's an ad, it loses all its inherent value.
Yeah, and that goes back to the whole like, you know, being a career artist, right? Like, what does it entail? Well, these days, being a career artist is basically being an influencer, and that doesn't come easily to a lot of artists, believe it or not. You know, like, and so, and becoming completely business minded, that doesn't come easy to a lot of artists as well. To the ones it does come easy to like, that's amazing. And you know, I feel like people like Connor Price on Spotify and like there's a few others, right? Like that's amazing. You see them just blowing up, but for I think the majority, it's a difficult concept, and so like it's really easy to have the business side like completely take over the passion of being a musician. Like you know, there's been so many times I've been like, oh man, I'm not even passionate about making music anymore because I was so overwhelmed by like running like my own label. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like it takes a lot. So it's definitely a balance that you have to keep on check at every single moment.
How do you manage to do that?
I think first is setting aside time for yourself. Like I try my best to not work on weekends, like no matter what. I just like I shut it off. I have to. Number two is knowing your limits. I think when you start working for yourself, you have to realize like how long should I keep working? Like it's easy to overwork as much as it's easy to underwork, right? If you're not disciplined enough, you might not work enough, or you just might overdo it. And so I think you need to learn your limits. Like, and that's going to take practice. It's trial and error, but you'll figure it out pretty quick. Setting limits to like the people that you're networking with, you know, taking everything with a grain of salt, because a lot of people are going to tell you a lot of different things, but the truth is that many things could work for you. It's not one path to where you need to get. And a lot of times you need to figure out that path for yourself, and there's nobody that can really tell you how to get there. So taking everything with a grain of salt, and just with that grain of salt, figuring out what your own path is, you know? And I'm sure you'll figure it out. Really. It's not as difficult as it sounds. Really, I think it's just setting boundaries.
Yeah. It's not as difficult, and it's as difficult as it sounds all at the same time. Like,
yeah. It's a mixed bowl of shit.
Well, that's the weird thing that over a long journey of doing this that I realize is there are things that work for some people that just don't work for others, and there are things that don't work for some that do work for others. And it depends what works for you. Like, I think there is this obsession, and I think this is in hip hop a lot, which is you have to grind 24/7. I'm always grinding. I'm hustling 24. I'm like, like it's the common language that is used, but to me it's always been quality, not quantity. Like if you work solid 4 hours straight, good 4 hours is better than 8 hours just fucking around, quote unquote, working. Like, oh, like I'm here, I'm hanging out, but you don't achieve anything. Well, then you didn't really hustle that hard over those 8 hours. You just liked the image of hustling. So I think it's about being true to what did you actually do today, as opposed to I need to make it look like I'm always busy 24/7.
Yeah. You know, that's a process that that I think every artist has to figure out for themselves. That discipline. I think I was fortunate again. Like, so I was in a K-pop group in 2015 called Royal Pirates, and when I was in Korea, gosh, not talking crap on that industry at all, but they work you like you're working like you're waking up at like 4 a.m. to do a TV show. After that TV show, you got another radio show and maybe a real show at night, right? And you're doing this. There's no days off. You don't get the weekend off. You're working Sunday to Sunday. Like, you're getting 4 hours of sleep at night. You're probably not eating the best. You're just eating when you can eat. And that type of mentality, kind of like, I'm not saying this is good for you, but that type of grind, it shaped like how, like when I got home from that, it was like getting home from being in the army. So like it just changed my mentality. I was just like, I always wake up early and I'm excited to start working because shoot, I'm up earlier working before anybody else. Like that's me getting more work done. And so it's like a discipline thing, but I see a lot of lack of that in a lot of like younger artists that I meet. Like they don't understand that work ethic and it pays off. But at the same time, it is a lot of work. You think someone like Justin Bieber doesn't work his ass off? Like, dude, I guarantee you that guy's schedule is like most people can't hang with it. And so, yeah, man, it's like, it's being able to push your limits kind of like, but at the same time, like setting it enough that you're not completely burning out because you don't want that either. But you'd be surprised at what our limits actually are. We can push ourselves pretty hard. And so, another fortunate thing is I'm surrounded by a lot of people that have succeeded. And that's just another driving factor, So it's every time I see one of my friends succeed, I'm like, it's possible. I can do it, so it's a great thing. But like it's not, I think a lot of people, when especially they look at social media and they have a false sense of what it takes to make it. They're like, oh man, just go on to Spotify, you blow up overnight and that's it. No, man, these people you're making reels every single day, sometimes 3 times a day. Like, and that's a lot of hard work in itself. Like you're writing music, like dropping it every month, and don't think that's the only song you have on deck. You probably have, 20, 30 on deck ready to go. Like, and it's like this crazy work process that people just don't see. Like, and you don't really show that on social media. Social media is more like a highlight reel. You only show like what you want people to see, but the work is hard. We could do it though.
Yeah. Well, also the people who see like you just blew up, they don't see the 5 years before where you didn't post anything because you weren't ready. Where
Absolutely.
you were like, I had to learn how to do all the things. I didn't just like pick up a guitar the first day and then I make a song 3 weeks out and that's it. Took me 3 weeks and then I blew up. That doesn't work that way because you just need a body of work. You need to be good enough. But yeah, how did you survive I say it like, when you said I treated it like military, I'm like going to talk about it like a military, but how did you survive such a grueling schedule? I know that you said you can surprise yourself with how far you can push yourself. Do you think it was because you didn't set the schedule? So you just get told, you got to be up at this time, you got to be here, you got to do this. And so it's easier because it's like, you just have to do it. Like there's no choice in a weird way.
I'm going to be honest. I loved it. I loved every single moment of it. You know, like in my head, I was thinking, hey, I get to do what I love and I get to get paid. Like, what else is there? You know, like, you know, I get to be on stage and play on television. I get to be on stage and play in front of like tons of people. Like, greatest job in the world. Like, what is there to complain about? Like, I'm not going to be a little bitch and be like, oh, you're working me too hard. And like, dude, go work at McDonald's then. I don't mean to sound like harsh, but it's like, that's what I'm trying to say. It's like, if you're going to be an artist, like you really have to know that it's the path meant for you. Like you have to be able to do it. Like for instance, like I've toured my entire life. Like it, that life isn't for most people. Most people can't handle that. You want to live out of a freaking 15 passenger van with 5 sweaty dudes. Like, you know, like it's not easy. But some people love it. I love it. You know, like, is it taxing on you at certain times? Yeah, like anything is, but like it has to be like a part of you. And so, you know what they say? They say, if you love what you do, it's not really work. And so that was always my mindset. I was always extremely just thankful that I got to do that. I don't think there was this one time, I think it was New Year's Eve, and me and the drummer Suyun, we ate this pizza and we got food poisoning. And we were playing this show at Hard Rock Cafe in Korea, and dude, we were about to just throw up everywhere, but we just held it in. And then we had a radio show right after that. So like, it was like really bad food poisoning. Like I needed to go to the bathroom. Like I was just like, just holding in for dear life. And we had a radio show after that. and we had to look like we're not sick. That's the hard part. Right. And then, so, you know, those times might be hard, but still, it's a cool job, man. It's a super cool job. So I think it's all right.
Yeah, no, it is. It's extremely cool. Like, I mean, it's a job that 99.99% of people will never have and never do, and never even come close to being able to say that I got to do stuff like that. So, yeah, I think it is an extremely cool job. Like I would be like, that's awesome. But I also know, for me personally, inherently, the touring life, not for me. I could do the tour, like everyone could do the tour, which is I get flown out first class, I go to a 5-star hotel, I do a couple of shows, and then I go to the next one and 5-star hotels and first class. That I could do.
Yeah, I think most people could do that.
But I think, you know, I had this when I was younger. I used to think about that I would potentially want to be a stand-up comedian. It's like, I've always been fascinating with the idea that someone can stand on a stage in front of a group of people and simply talk, and it mesmerizes a crowd. I found that fascinating for a long period of time.
Sure.
But what I realized and what I learned about myself is I'm not willing to put in the work required to be the best at my craft at that. I'm not willing to go on a Thursday night, drive an hour to some gig and bomb, and then do it all over again for a period of years and hate myself in the process. Like, I'm not willing to do the shit stuff. I'm attracted to the glory, but you cannot get the glory if that's the only thing you want, if you're not willing to go through the journey of like actually having to master it. And so I just was like, I'm okay with not doing it because I know I'm not willing. I don't love it enough. It's not what I was meant to do.
Yeah. But I mean, that's true. I can't argue with that.
Like, but, I actually don't have regret. That's the thing, is like, but I thought about it. Like, I genuinely was like, I could go down this path or I could choose a different path. And I'm much happier I ended up starting a podcast than I am that I did stand-up comedy. I went to a gig yesterday, a stand-up comedy show, and it seemed thankless. Like the craft, it was a small room. They were trying jokes. They just weren't landing very hard. And I was like, that, I'm not sure how my ego would take that. And so I'm like, okay.
So, okay. So I agree. I agree. And, you know, like for artists, you know, I'm not saying that everybody has to be willing to go through that, like that shit stage. Like there is smarter working, you know, like it's like maybe don't try to freaking start going on tour before you have a audience, right? Like that will probably eliminate playing in front of 3 people. Like, there are smart ways to do things. I think a lot of artists they just want to get out there and look cool as fast as possible. So there's just like, hey, let's play the show, even if we got to pay for all the tickets and sell it to like our mom and dad and cousins and stuff like that. Like they're not really thinking it out. They just want to be famous. Like they just want to look cool, and that's understandable. But there's definitely smarter ways to get there. You know, like we're in the digital age. Like you can build an audience online before you even set up your first show these days. You couldn't do that in 2008. Or you could have, but the chances of you succeeding was still been pretty low. But so I think it also has to do with working smarter. You know, who knows if you're a comedian and you're just doing these TikTok reels of you, like, you know, doing your parts of your set for 30 seconds, you never know, man. You could blow up like, you know, overnight, and then all of a sudden there would be no shit shows. You are flying out like first class to wherever you need to go. So not saying that's going to happen to everybody, but there is a path, you know, if you don't want to go that route. But I think the work ethic is still the same. Like if you're not willing, doesn't mean you have to do it sometimes, but if you're not willing to put in those hours, the chances of you succeeding in whatever you're trying to do is probably going to be much less likely than anything. So,
Well, if I'm honest, I think I'd rather get flown out first class and speak to people like you than to do the other thing. That's more what I realized is like, this is significantly more rewarding, or I'm finding it extremely rewarding. I'm not that it's more rewarding, but it's rewarding in a different way. And that I'm like, I think it's because I'm satisfied with what I'm currently doing, which makes me look back and be like, I don't feel like I missed out.
yeah, and that's it. You found your passion. You found that gift set. That's where you you know, that's where you excel at. And that's all what it's all about.
Well, I'm like you, man. I'm like, I don't care about getting up early on 5 hours sleep to be able to do an interview. That is not difficult for me.
Yeah.
Like no one, and you know, I'm independent, so no one has to tell me what to do. No one gets to tell me what to do. I make all my own decisions. I schedule my own calendars. But because I do that, it's not difficult. Like the difficulty is the other stuff, but talking to you is not difficult to me. Like this is the fun part. This is like the part that I'm like, hell yes, I have another interview today. I get to talk to somebody who is incredible at what they do. I get some insight. I'm doing something that, number one, I never thought I would ever do, be in a position like this to be able to talk to people like you. And the other thing is, it's like a lot of fun. I learn so much, and it gives like it allows me to look through the window into a house that I don't live in. I'm not an artist myself. Like I don't make music, so I get to like peer through the window, and I'm invited in the house to kind of look around and learn and ask questions. And that I never thought would be possible when I started. Like who was going to say yes to interviews like this? And so now I'm like, every day that I get to do this is just a blessing.
Yeah, so when you're doing stuff that you love, it's you know, the work part of it is like it's different.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm excited for you to continue making music. I know that it is a grind, but you seem like happy and content, and it's so good to see. I think a lot of people can go the other way. They're like, can feel like they're owed And it doesn't seem like you feel that way. It feels like you're genuinely blessed. And I think that's such a good energy to have.
Oh man, you know, I think a lot of artists, like, you know, they you have to have humility as an artist. A lot of artists, I feel like they think their stuff is always the best. You know, they're it's okay to be proud of your work, but just got to know there's always someone out there that's going to wipe you down, man. Like there are so many amazingly talented people out there, and that's being the best. I just don't think that's what being an artist is about, you know? It's just it's about being who you are, and finding a place in all of it. You know, we're all just trying to find a place in this world. We're just, you know, where do we fit in with the craft that we do? You know, there's just like there's a million podcasts out there. It's not about competing with another podcast. It's about finding your place in that world. And so I'm extremely happy to find my place in this world as an artist. You know, I'm content right there. I don't have to be the best. You know, that's not even what I'm trying to sell. Like, I'm just super blessed to be able to pay my rent and write music. That's like super cool to me, you know, and I couldn't. So in that sense, as a child, if I'm looking back, like, did I make my dreams come true? Yeah, I did. In that sense, absolutely.
That's pretty amazing to say.
Sometimes I say cool shit, sometimes no.
Wait, you don't say cool shit all the time, 24/7. It's not always cool. But just the sentiment is cool to be able to say and mean it. I think that's more to be like, yeah, I did make my dreams come true. That's pretty amazing, man.
Yeah, I guess it is.
Well, speaking of amazing, obviously the one Enik came through. I only have one more question for you, man. It is the
Sure.
only question that I actually plan on the show. It's the only question that I've said on the show every episode, almost every episode. But if you had to recommend one album that everybody should listen to at least once to get an appreciation of, can be any genre of music, cannot be your own music, what would it be?
Oh my God, that is so difficult. That is so difficult. Dang. I can't narrow it down to one.
Well, what are you feeling at the moment?
I've been super addicted to this artist called Lolo recently. She's like a pop rock artist, and I cannot stop listening to her. But I don't know if that qualifies.
Does she have a project that you haven't been able to stop listening to?
She's just, I think she's just, you know, like, I'm not like a super fan of the music that like I listen to. I'm more of a fan of like each song. So I couldn't tell you if it's on an album. I just listen to singles. But whatever she's releasing, and I'm probably also more of a fan of like who's ever doing the production work, because I've always been like that. I always look at artists and the first time I'm like, who produced this? and so, or who mixed this? Like, so whoever her team is, like, super impressed by it. I just think it's like it's pushing the boundaries of you know, where pop rock is at the moment. I feel like it's starting to. I feel like rock, alternative pop music is starting to mesh with, like, you know, different elements of hip hop and just electronic. Like, it's kind of being meshed all into one, and I'm really excited for where it's going right now. So, her music definitely does that while still fitting in like the pop world. Like, you know, so it's not like so far out there that it's not digestible. I think any audience could dig her music, and I really like her stuff. So I think people should go check that out. But I should probably plug like people that I know.
I mean, you don't have to. You don't. I mean, you can still plug them. We've got plenty of time, so that's not going to run out. Besides, it's fun to plug people who may not know you like them. I think there's something cool about that like you get to shout out someone and you're like, oh, if they ever heard this, they'd be like, I didn't know that he liked my music. That's really cool. I like his
Well, I don't know
music.
if she's ever gonna watch this podcast and know that I said that, but yeah, I dig her music. There's another band called Girlfriends that that I listen to, and I really like their stuff too. It's just, I feel like a lot of like that whole alternative scene is just getting better and better and better as time goes by. I just like to see how it's evolving. Just love a lot of stuff. Even the new Bring Me the Horizon stuff. Really dig that too.
Well, you're a part of it, my friend. You're part of it evolving and putting music out there. And it has genuinely been a pleasure to talk to you, to get some insight into your journey and what makes you tick outside of the work. But where can they find you? What are you working on? What can we plug for you, and where can fans show some love?
So if people want to check me out, you can find me on Spotify. It's Enik, E-N-I-K, all caps. If you want to find me on social media, on Instagram is probably the best place. And that's my handle is I'm Enik. And things that I'm currently working on right now, I have my own label called Drop Cult. We are developing different artists that kind of fit in that all pop space. One of them is called Fuzzy. I'm really excited for his stuff. I think he's like the male version of Olivia Rodrigo. And,
That's awesome.
And yeah, his new stuff is just mind blowing, and I think it's really gonna shake the whole industry. Well, at least where Asian American music is at right now. And then also producing some music for my buddy James Lee. He's a pretty big independent artist right now, and mostly he's based out of China, but dude is killing it. And I'm excited for his stuff. He's going to be releasing like a rock album out here soon. But besides that, I'm actually working on software development, believe it or not, like AI software development to better help artists in their career. Like I'm trying to create the tools, like having a whole team behind you as an independent artist. I feel like some of the hardest things to do as an artist is again doing all these things, like because you have to wear so many hats as your own business. And we wanted to create under Drop Cult like software that kind of helped artists manage that, help them do different things, and that's something I've been really passionate about. Also we're starting to develop audio plugins for music for producers. And that's something I'm really excited about. I geek out about tech stuff all the time, especially with music stuff. So, but a lot of exciting things happening. I'm excited to see where it goes.
That's awesome.
But, taking that risk.
Hey man, you're literally doing it all. It's one thing to manage artists. It's another thing to have your own career. It's another thing to be a producer and then an audio designer, and then to be in the Gen AI space and the tech world and software world. It's awesome, man. Like genuinely, it is so good to see people who are passionate and genuinely invested in music continuing to add to it and not taking away. And you're definitely one of those people. So highly recommend for anyone who may not be aware or is aware, is to continue showing love to Enik. Absolute pleasure, man. I got a lot out of this conversation. I know that the audience would have got a lot out of this conversation, and yeah, can't wait to see you keep dropping music and keep seeing what you do next.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Had a great time here.